Speaker today is Steve Krantz, who is, well, we've known each other for quite a while. I haven't seen you on site here for a while. He's going to be talking to us about Jewish gay rights and Jewish gay rights activism. Steve is currently the Vice President of PFLAG, Los Angeles, and he may explain that, and leader of the LGBT Youth Advocates Coalition, founder of Jews for Marriage Equality, and a recipient of West Hollywood's Rainbow Key Award, and the recent recipient of the LA LGBT Center's Model of Pride Leadership Award. Where do you keep all these awards? He is he is the board chairman of the Lavender Effect, an LA-based organization dedicated to promoting the culture and heritage of the LGBT community, and he serves on the board of the LA LGBT Child Abuse Prevention Council. He was born in New York City, grew up in Queens, attended high school there and Queens College, and he has a PhD in computer science and is the author of Cyber Guardian, a secure the village guide for residents. His wife and he are members of Temple Aliyah locally and live happily nearby. So we welcome you back, Steve. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just start off by saying that my wife and I were married right here by Rabbi Feinstein in 2009. So I'm very familiar with the synagogue and hold it in very high regard. And that's why it's a pleasure to speak to you all. I was a member of Hazak, but about 5 years ago, because we live in the West Valley, we decided to join Temple Aliyah. But again, it's a pleasure to be here. So let me talk about the purpose of this of my talk this morning. It's my memories. I've been involved with the LGBT community or the gay community. I'm going to use the term gay throughout this talk for over 20 years. So let me get started. First, read the quote, and I selected this very carefully because of the source of the quote. Most of you probably knew him, and I revered him. The reason we joined Valley Beth Shalom in 2004 was because of Rabbi Schulweis and these quotes from him. Let me read it. What is demanded of me and of every Jew is to protect the hounded, the persecuted, the humiliated, the ostracized, the pariahs created by human beings and not by God. What is required of us is to accept the dignity of each individual, to know the heart of the stranger, to make them feel at home with us, and to encourage them to live out their own lives with dignity and within a compassionate community. So the reason we joined this synagogue when we moved here from, and I'm going to talk about my journey across the country with my family, was because of men such as wise men such as Rabbi Schulweis. Let me now go to the content of my talk in terms of definitions for everyone, if you're unfamiliar. And I'm not surprised. In fact, the question just came up. A friend just asked me the other night, we were out to dinner, and asked me, would I be involved with the gay community or the LGBT community had not my son come out? And I said, probably not. But now that I am, I'm going to share some of my understanding in general, and then I'll talk about my personal journey. So if you look at these photos, some of them I'm sure are familiar to you. You've got Gertrude Stein, a noted author who was known as a lesbian Jewish. You've got Leonardo da Vinci. Maybe a surprise. I read a biography of Leonardo. It was well known that he was a gay man, but because he was so damn smart, they left him alone and appreciated his contributions to the world. The man on the right side is Alan Turing, a hero of mine. Being a computer scientist for most of my life, he is one of the most famous computer scientists that ever lived. Hounded to death by the British government in the early 1950s because he was gay. A tragedy, a terrible, terrible tragedy. I include Eleanor Roosevelt on the lower left. It's not 100% certain that she was a lesbian, but it was certainly suspicious. On the other side is Walt Whitman, a great poet, was known to be gay. Bayard Rustin, who was one of the men behind the civil rights movement, who helped Martin Luther King succeed. He was well known to be a gay man. And I just threw in Ellen. I know all of you maybe watch her show. I have to admit I don't, but I admire her, and I admired her courage for coming out publicly. And the fact that she is still remained accepted and well regarded is this great statement about the progress that our nation has made in accepting LGBT. Okay, let me just go into some definitions and the basics. There's that acronym, that awful acronym, LGBTQIA. Let me quickly go through some of them. I'll go into a little more detail in a little bit. L, lesbian, women who are sexually attracted to women. Gay, men who are sexually attracted to other men. Bisexual, both. Transgender, which I'm going to talk about a little bit because it's in the news today, sadly, are individuals who are born in a particular gender physically, but mentally they see themselves as the opposite gender. Queer is a relatively new term, that's the Q, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but it's basically people who don't see themselves as any one of the particular categories. Intersex is a physical result from birth where sexual organs could be duplicated, or you could have both. You could have both a vagina and a penis, and some they're not formally in terms of activism part of the work that I do, but they are part of this community of essentially sexual minorities. Asexual is somebody who's just not interested in sex. And there is a new acronym coming out. I haven't heard it much recently, but it was hot within the last few years. SOGI, Sexual Orientation / Gender Identity. And it's a new acronym in case you encounter it. The big message today, really, if I could leave you with one sentence, is nobody decides, nobody wakes up one morning and says, you know, I want to be gay, I want to try this out. That's baloney. And I go back to the story of my son, who I love very much, and I get emotional about when I talk about him, and I'll probably get emotional again when I go through my year-by-year, well, I'll go quickly through my year-by-year history. I know he didn't want to be gay. He discovered it when he hit puberty. I remember he was happy and outgoing as a child, had a best friend, they did everything together. 11 years old, he hits puberty, and everything changed, and we couldn't figure out why. Why did he break up with his best friend? And I heard anecdotally that it was because his best friend and other friends got interested in girls and started talking about them, and he just didn't have that in his head. And he withdrew. He withdrew from the friendships. He kind of withdrew in school, and we didn't understand it until 6 years later when he hit 17, and he pulled me aside and said, Dad, I'm gay. And that was a very, I'm slowing myself down because I get emotional about it, tremendously courageous thing for him to do, because he really didn't know what I was going to say or do, but he did know that I loved him. And that enabled him to have the courage to stand up and declare that to me. It was in private, just he and I. And at that moment, I became a gay rights activist. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but my thought was, how do I protect this young man going forward? Here's this, and he's not as big as me. And here he's not only not as big as his dad, he's gay, could be a victim. He could be a target. And it worried me from that moment. And so it's why I'm here. It's why I'm here and why I get a great deal of satisfaction about educating people and sharing this history. Roughly 3.5% to 10% of the population, it falls within this LGBTQIA category. Oh, I almost forgot my left-handed story. Why do I have a picture of a left hand? I am a lefty. How many, please raise your hand if you're left-handed. Oh, we have the percentage is higher than we have. 1, 2, about 6 of us are lefties. And when I speak in schools, I ask that question, and I walk up to one of the lefties, and I pointedly say to them, well, when did you decide to become a lefty? And I universally get the response, they kind of like, what are you talking about? I didn't decide, I am a lefty. And then I take that example and I say, bingo, that's what being LGBTQIA is. You just are. It's in your brain. No one decides, no one chooses. And that has been a canard that fundamentalist religions have foisted upon humanity and caused so much pain and anguish and difficulty, which I'm still hopeful will be overcome as we move in the future. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the transgender issue in the news. Did a little bit of individuals that, why is there Hebrew on that? I don't know, I didn't put that there. Anyway, that is really odd. My slide changed and I don't know why. Anyway, individuals who are born a particular physical sex, a gender, as we call it, and in their heads, they're the opposite. And what we're learning is that this can happen pretty young, that some kids, they're physically a girl, but in their head, they're a boy, and vice versa. One of the things that's happening in the news, which is very sad to me, and it's occurred in a couple of southern states like Florida, and I'm going to talk a little more about Florida and South Carolina, where politicians have taken advantage of these issues because they're controversial and because the science is infirm, and creating laws that restrict the support of transgender kids. And that really, really worries me. And that's why on this slide you can see the recent Florida rule that their recently re-elected governor, and I don't want to talk too negatively about him, but my view of him is very low. He's using a very, very small percentage of children's issues to make a big deal out of it. And that's plain wrong and immoral in my opinion. Similarly, South Carolina has a law that prevents transgender athletes from using the bathroom of their choice, despite the fact that there's never been a single reportable incident of someone being attacked like someone of appearance of a particular gender actually attacking others in a bathroom. This doesn't occur. It hasn't occurred, and yet it's an issue that results in harm to transgender youth. And I don't know do you see Hebrew on the screen? I didn't put that there. I don't know how that happened. It must be the software. This is Jewish software that I'm dealing with. Okay. Well, it looks like it's limited. Oh, no. The bottom quote is all, that's fascinating. We're gonna investigate this, Joel, at the end. So this was supposed to be the slide about gender queer, or queer, which is a relatively new term. I think back to, this is about 7 or 8 years ago. I'm speaking in a high school, and I do my shtick. Now, my shtick is the left-handed thing, and I talk about that, and I get a good reaction, and it's helpful to kids who really don't understand. But then 2 young girls spoke after me, and they talked about being gender fluid. And I'd never heard that before. So here's this big shot activist, and I'm ignorant of this. I see young girls, teenage girls in high school, saying that I'm gender fluid, which what they mean by, I'm not sure I'm a girl or a boy. And that's relatively new. What it speaks to me is that people are, because of the acceptance of LGBT people in society, it's given others the courage to speak the truth, to not hide, to not be in the closet. So, and I'm happy about that. And I learned more about this gender queer or gender fluid title. You're not exclusively masculine or feminine. And I met individuals who describe themselves that way. They're outside the gender binary, the man or woman. And the confusing term is cis-normativity. I just put that on the slide, but you don't have to remember it. And it may express a combination of masculinity and femininity, or neither in their gender expression. Oh, and this one also has Hebrew on it. I can't figure out why. It may be hard to see this particular slide, but look at the colors. What the colors indicate is the relative safety of LGBT people around the world. The blue, which includes the United States and Canada and Australia and good parts of South America and Western Europe, rather, France and Britain, marriage is accepted for same-sex couples. But at the opposite extreme, and it's very sad to note this, there are countries in Africa that if you're discovered as gay, you're either put in prison or you're executed. Think of the stupidity, the ignorance, the tragedy of that. And occasionally, in one of the organizations I'll talk about a little bit that I volunteer for, we get emails. Just got an email from a young man in Brazil, which is one of the safer countries, who writes that his father doesn't accept him and about to throw him out of the house. Could you give me money for a plane ticket to come to the United States? So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to this young man? The question? Yes. Yeah. To be perfectly honest, I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry. Do the Muslims or the Muslim religion, what are their rules for being LGBT? And I believe it's the same as Christian, Orthodox Christian, which is you're a sinner, and basically you don't have any rights to. Correct. You're not stoned. But you're not forgiven if you practice. And it's similar to our Orthodox. Yes. Yes. And just, I mean, and was Alan Turing, as I said, was yes. Exactly. And let me, I'm worried about Israel. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday which talked about, they interviewed many of us in the US and expressing concerns about the recent election where it appears that some of the leadership that report to Netanyahu are homophobes. Specifically, that word was mentioned in the New York Times article. And that's a terrible thing. It makes, I mean, one of my rules for travel is I will not spend money in a country that doesn't give my son equal rights. And here I'm a lover of Israel. I have family in Israel. And what's happening in Israel makes me very sad. Because I was having difficulty hearing the questions. Anyway, this is very hard to see from the screen, but if you get my slides, I'll be glad to share it. I copied this, and it just shows the diversity, and sadly, there are places in the world where it's very, very dangerous to be an out LGBT person. Okay, what I also wanted to cover very proudly is VBS and the conservative movement's pioneering history. And I hearken back to 1992. I don't know how many of you were here in 1992. So did you hear Rabbi Schulweiss's sermon? So it's, I mean, it's a mark, to me, it's a mark of great pride. As I said earlier, that's why we joined the synagogue when we moved into Sherman Oaks. He gave a Rosh Hashanah sermon entitled Morality, Legality, and Homosexuality, and one of the quotes that I extracted was, "Did you choose to be gay or lesbian? Is this a matter of free will, your gay or lesbian lifestyle? The answers are much the same. Do you think that what I am, I would willingly choose?" And it echoes my point about my own son, who I knew if he could choose, why would you choose to be a victim? Why would you choose to be someone that's a pariah? No one does that. It makes no sense. You are, and you don't choose. And so here, the wisdom of our great rabbi, Harold Schulweiss. In 2006, the conservative movement created a responsa supporting LGBT rabbis and same-sex unions, and it was adopted by the conservative movement, led by Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who I know well from AJU. Very proud to know him. He marched with me in the Pride Parade in 2008. One of the things that I'm proud of that we had on our website, I'd love to see it come back, is a welcoming page for LGBT families. I think that's very important because if you're an LGBT couple, you don't know what kind of reception you're going to get depending on the synagogue, especially in the conservative movement. There can be more conservative or less conservative. It could be a place like VBS or Temple Aliyah where LGBT people are welcomed, and it can be a conservative synagogue where they're rejected. So I think having a welcoming website page is a good thing, and I'm working to get Aliyah to create one too. I did the first one here in 2006. The other thing I want to talk about in my introduction, I mentioned I founded Jews for Marriage Equality. This was back in 2006 and 2007, and I got the full support of Rabbi Feinstein to use the synagogue as a meeting place for activists, for gay Jews who wanted to stand up and fight against Proposition 8. We lost. What we did was we created a clergy statement that nearly 300 rabbis in the state of California signed, including our rabbis here, rabbis in Temple Aliyah, around the state, to support the LGBT community and support the notion of same-sex marriage. We lost, but somehow we came back in 2012, and same-sex marriage is now legal throughout the country. So I salute Rabbi Feinstein's support in 2007 and 8 for our organization and that effort. So now I'm going to tell you just a little bit more, kind of go through my story, because I think there's some points of interest about it. So I'm born in New York City, Sunnyside, Queens, for those of you who know of it. 20, how many years later? God, that's a lot of years later. My 17-year-old son, as I said earlier, comes out, and we find PFLAG Fort Lauderdale. So now let me talk a little bit about what PFLAG is, which is an organization that's going to be 50 years old next year, one of the oldest gay rights organizations in the world. It's a national organization. It's very small, the national office. And then there are over 400 chapters run by volunteers all over the country. So PFLAG Los Angeles was the second chapter founded in the country by a wonderful woman, Jewish woman, named Adele Starr. She had a son, just like me, loved him, couldn't tolerate that he would be discriminated against. So she joined with a lot of mothers were involved in this, to start PFLAG chapters. And so PFLAG Los Angeles was started 49 years ago. What is PFLAG? What does each chapter do? Volunteer run. Every month there's a meeting. Now it's on Zoom, sadly. Hopefully it'll go back to being in person. But a meeting of approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours dedicated to support, where families who are just learning that their child is LGBT, kid came out, they found some reading material, who knows how they discovered it, they come and they ask questions. And they learn from people like me the truth and the understanding of what it means to be LGBT. And they learn, they feel better, they accept their child, they do the right thing. So that's the goal, really the main goal of PFLAG. So that's the support role. We also do advocacy. One of the things I've done over the years is I've lobbied in Washington, D.C. I've lobbied in Sacramento. And I'm going to talk about my reverence for the state of California in that regard a little bit. So we do advocacy for laws that protect LGBT people. One of the most frustrating things for me as an activist is that there's a Equality Act that's been pending in Congress for at least 10 years. And now with the House of Representatives flipping over to a different party, it's unlikely that's going to be brought to the floor and voted on as it should be. But we'd love to see that essentially provide support for LGBT people in terms of housing and employment in particular. Over 30 states in the United States do not have such protective laws, including the state of Florida, which we lived in for 20 years. But happily, the state of California does have those protections. We're in the other 19 states that do the right thing for their LGBT citizens. So I'm leading up to I use the word immigrate. I left the homophobic state of Florida, which is still a homophobic state. Not to say that there aren't good people there and accepting people, and the locale that we left, which was Broward County, Florida, where we were Chad counters, my wife and I, by the way, back in 2000. I just threw that in. Florida doesn't have a gay person who was discovered renting an apartment in the state of Florida and in the other 30 states can just be thrown out because of their apartment because they're gay. They can just be fired from their job just because they're gay. It's disgraceful. How could that be? But we have state legislatures that don't do the right thing. So we immigrated from the homophobic state of Florida to the great state of California, which has such protective laws. So I want to say how much I appreciate being here and living here. In 2004, we found PFLAG Los Angeles. We started in PFLAG Fort Lauderdale. Then we joined PFLAG Los Angeles. I became the president of that chapter. And then in 2006, I did mention the work I've done here as a member of Valley Beth Shalom. I founded an organization called the LA LGBT Youth Advocates Coalition. And it's because of what my son went through in high school in Florida, the victimization he suffered, the discrimination he suffered, wasn't all that terrible, I have to be honest. I mean, we did get support from the principal of his high school, but he did suffer and was discriminated against. And one of the things he wanted that stuck with me was he wanted to have events, wanted to have social events that would be positive for him. And he wanted to be able to advertise them, and there really wasn't any outlet. So what I did in 2006 was I made contact with all the LGBT youth supportive organizations in Los Angeles. And there are over 30 of them, would you believe? And you can look on the website, lalgbtyac.org. And if you want to know about it, I'll tell you later. That there are over 30 organizations that host their events for gay youth on a common calendar that I created. So that my thought was, if there's one lonely gay kid who needs a friend, they go to that and they can find an event. They can find something to do to meet others. One of the things that we do have here that I assume many of you are aware of is we have the largest LGBT center in the world in Los Angeles. Got an over $30 million budget. There are many generous LGBT people, successful LGBT people in LA that maintain that wonderful organization that cares about the health of its LGBT citizens and homeless youth and many other programs. One program that just occurred is called Models of Pride, and it was implemented by a couple of colleagues of mine that it's been ongoing for over 30 years. 30 years. It's a day of where gay youth from all over the area, and some even farther than that around the state, come to a central place for a day of workshops and a fair. And LGBT organizations participate there, hand out flyers, and it's called Models of Pride. It just occurred. And I mentioned this before, I talked about it, I won't talk about it again, but I founded Jews for Marriage Equality to fight Prop 8, 2007. So what do I do today? I speak at middle and high schools, and I talked a little bit about that. PFLAG Los Angeles has a speakers bureau, and we have a standard format for that speakers bureau, and we're available for invitation, happy to come, no charge. We'll bring a panel of 4 people. Somebody like me, a parent, supports their kids, a gay man, a lesbian, and a transgender person. And we'll all basically, we come there, I'll tell the PFLAG story, like I just told you now, a little bit briefer, a couple of minutes, and then we'll tell our personal story of when our kid came out or how we have our experiences as an LGBT person, and then we open it up for questions. So we'll typically do that in high schools. We do that in LAUSD high schools and other high schools, and it's a pleasure to do it. And I always do my left-handed shtick. As I said, PFLAG, I already talked about PFLAG Los Angeles. This is another organization that I joined about almost 8 years ago called the Lavender Effect. And I met a wonderful Jewish man named Andy Sacher. I tend to, have to be honest, I tend to favor Jews. Keep that to us. And Andy's just a wonderful guy, young man who is very talented artistically, organizationally. And what he wanted to do was support the cultural heritage of the LGBT community. He's made unbelievable videos, oral histories, for example, of some of the greatest contributors in LA. And it's on his website, thelavendereffect.org. And it's wonderful material is on there, so I work with him. I created self-guided tours that are on the internet of LA. One is of Hollywood, a gay-themed, self-guided tour of Hollywood. You can go to the website, The Lavender Effect, find the tour, and just sit in your living room in your underwear and take that tour. But you could do it in person, too. It's actually more fun to do it in person. To tour Hollywood and look at the gay-themed places and artifacts. There's a downtown LA tour, and we have a third, but it's slipping my mind. So I've been contributing to that. And I mentioned the Los Angeles LA LGBT Youth Advocates Coalition already. And then I'm also on a board which is funded by the city of LA. We get an annual budget and we use it for materials that we hand out. So I'm at my last slide. You can get involved if you want. And one of the things, and I mentioned this in terms of the webpage that would be nice, continue to welcome LGBTQ families to shul. I think that's a great thing. Sometimes they can feel left out and unwelcome. And support financially, perhaps, or join a local organization like PFLAG, like the LA LGBT Center, like Equality California. Equality California, think of it as a lobbying organization for laws to protect LGBT people in our state. They've done a lot already, certainly as compared to many other states in the country. And consider supporting a national organization like the Human Rights Campaign. I'm done. Yes.
That the governor of Colorado is not only Jewish, but gay.
Yes.
Which speaks well for America.
It does.
Now, absolutely. The question is, will we have a gay president one day?
I'm sure they'd be a wonderful president.
We could start small with just a Jewish president. My question is, how do the different sects, organizations, the Reform, Conservative, what are their rabbis doing? Are all the conservative rabbis marrying gay people? What is their stand on it? What are their rights?
I know that the Reform movement is fully accepting.
Right.
As my understanding about the conservative movement is, I would use the term mostly accepting. And I'm not, in LA, I'm not aware of a rejecting
I know some
school.
that didn't, of the older ones, if you will, but they attended services for married.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
I know some rabbis that wouldn't marry gays, but they did go to the gay marriage of people.
I would say in the conservative
movement
is
fluid,
conflicted. Let's say it's conflicted.
But I would.
I'm proud to be here because I don't see Valley Beth Shalom or Temple Aliyah with the wonderful Rabbi Vogel. They're fully supportive.
He started here.
Let's hope it gets better.
Find a partner. Where is he today?
He's an attorney in Los Angeles, and he doesn't have a partner. I wish he did. He'd be welcome.
I just wanted to say that to a certain extent, I think, just judging from my own personal acquaintances and my own personal community, this is all you're kind of preaching to the choir here.
Good.
We all, I mean, maybe because we live in LA around Hollywood people and things, this is so totally accepted. There's only really two issues that are controversial. And one is humans that have gone through puberty as males competing in sports with humans who have not gone through puberty as males. This seems inherently unfair. And I don't really understand why any human who has gone through male puberty would want to compete with humans who have not. It's just not a fair.
I have to apologize. I'm having trouble understanding you through the mask.
Sorry. It's a question of the sports issue. And humans who have been through puberty as males have a biological advantage over humans who have not gone through puberty as males. So why would they even want to compete in that situation. It's so inherently unfair.
To be perfectly honest, I'm conflicted about that too. I understand what you're saying. I mean, men in certain sports have a natural advantage. because
Yes, it's from
size and
testosterone
strength.
during puberty, and you can't undo that.
I mean, eventually, I think we'll figure it out.
We'll have a third, I could really see having a third category,
Maybe.
okay? And the other thing is the bathroom issue.
Well, but the bathroom, personally, I think the bathroom issue is a non-issue.
Well, we could have unisex bathrooms, so that would fix it.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say that to a certain extent, I feel like, at least here in Los Angeles, this really is a decided issue.
Right. Exactly. That's
Except for
why we
those two
immigrated
things.
here. We immigrated here because of that.
Yeah, right.
I've heard, thank you for your talk, Steve. I've heard another level of concern, which is especially has a sort of a leak through consequence for Judaism, which is transgender surgeries and whether it is wrong to have those without the recipient being an adult already, because of course that transforms immediately to circumcision, which I tend not to think of directly when I'm thinking about all this, but which has been tied up with the transgender conformity surgery. So is that an issue, or is that just echoing in my mind?
It is an issue. I mean, a lot of the issues that are public now have to do with youth, and there's concerns that hormone therapy is or is not reversible. It's not, from the article, I mean, this is hot right now in the news. I just read another, again, in the New York Times, which I'm a New Yorker, so I've been reading it since I was a little boy. There's controversy about that. There isn't certainty on the non-surgical treatments. The thing that troubles me is the exploitation of these issues for political gain. I think that it should get out of the political space, which we see in states that want to discriminate, that want to cater to, frankly, what I consider their religious extremist constituents. That's to me a travesty and shouldn't occur. But I understand for physical surgery, like top surgery or bottom surgery, usually it's an adult. They made the choice, like Chaz Bono, for example, who I've met. That's what's her name? Cher's originally a daughter, now a son. I met him. I mean, he was an adult, had the surgery. Okay. So I understand the concern. I think we need to just treat people with respect and not make it a political issue.
If you're on the Zoom stream and you have any comments or questions, type them in the chat. We've got Brian here to translate for you and ask Steve. Steve, I've got a couple questions. One is pronouns.
Oh, yes.
Really confusing to me. And I mean, is it just a Gen X, Gen Z kind of thing that it's become fashionable now? But
You know, it's because I'm 75. And I know I should put when I'm on Zoom, especially for LGBT related call or a meeting, I know I should put it, but I'm just not in my head to do that. I think eventually we'll get past it, and because right now there's fluidity as to what the right pronoun is if someone is queer, for example. I've heard they, instead of being a he or a him. And I personally have trouble saying it. Here I am, an out activist, and I'm admitting to you that I have difficulty with it, just like you do. I'm concerned that it's not settled. It's just one of the things that's not settled. But again, I'd come back to the notion of treating everyone with respect.
Well, I don't want to get it wrong, you know, when.
I've made terrible mistakes. I'll tell you this story. I had a colleague who was transgender. He transitioned late in life. He was the CIO, Chief Information Officer of Boeing, one time. And once I found that out, I couldn't keep in my head that he was now a woman. She. See, I said he. I called him he. And a couple of times I made that mistake, and I felt embarrassed, and I would apologize. Look, we've lived so many decades with he, him, her, you know. So what my attitude is, I do the best I can, and if I make a mistake, I apologize. That's all.
The problem is that everything has he or she. I mean, a city is a she and a boat. But in German, they have a neuter word. There's der for male, die for female, and das for neuter. And none of the very few other languages, I know Spanish doesn't, French doesn't, they don't have that neuter word, das, which is.
And maybe we'll get there. You're making a good point. So thank you for that. Maybe I'm going to research that and communicate that to my activist colleagues.
The same with Hebrew also. They're looking for a word.
A neutral word, yeah. I just can't say they. When I hear they, I get confused. So I'm sympathetic.
They confuses me. Oh, yes. You got a Zoom comment.
Hi, Steve. We got a Zoom question. The question I'll read here is, do you discuss with students or others about genetic and hormonal studies along with the left-handedness?
When I'm at schools, do I discuss that? Not really. I mean, my goal, and let me talk a little bit about the history of that, because I think you'll find that interesting, and then I'll directly address it. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's a tremendous change, especially, and also within PFLAG meetings, tremendous change over 20 years. In 20 years, at the beginning, back in the early 2000s, we would have a PFLAG meeting, and we'd be in person, of course. There was no Zoom, I mean, back then. Although there was video conferencing, but very little used. And the individual, a couple would come, parents. The mother would cry throughout the entire meeting, and the father would utter one sentence saying, you know, oh, my son just came out, or my daughter, and that would be it. And they would listen. That was 20 years ago. Flash forward to today, and I think it's due to the internet. You now have the ability privately to get a lot more information than you ever got back in 20 years ago, pre-internet, or when the internet was in its infancy in 1998. At least that's my experience, and I'm sure it's even more stark going back to the 70s and 80s and before that. So people have learned. So now what's a typical PFLAG meeting is we'll get parents, and 90% are just concerned about a transgender child coming out. Very rare even to talk about, because gay and people understand it now. They've learned. And so there has been, it's a tremendous progress. Now, I wonder whether, because we're in Los Angeles and because we're in California, that we're not seeing the full picture, the broad picture, because there are states where it's dangerous to have a PFLAG meeting. That was one of my most stunning PFLAG meetings. I'm running a PFLAG meeting in Fort Lauderdale, and we had guests coming from northern Florida, Jacksonville area. They couldn't advertise their meeting because they'd get threats. I mean, we really can't imagine that here. because it's much more accepted. So there's a great diversity of acceptance around, certainly the country, and as I showed, the world goes from death to love. It's stunning. Yes.
Now, just a point of clarity, when you're talking to schools, you're referring to adults at schools in separate meetings as opposed to maybe this
No,
person was.
student
These are
classes.
students as well,
Yes.
and the age group that you're talking to.
Will typically be brought in by the health teacher, the health class, and we'll have one of our panels, and so that they learn that we're real. Yes.
All right, Steve, this is a question about Talmudic references.
Uh-oh, I'm in
Okay.
trouble now.
Yeah.
Where's the rabbi?
And the question is, do you discuss Talmudic references to Andromedus and Turmum from 200 to 600 AD?
I think we need the gentleman before me. I can't answer the question.
I'm just the clerk here, okay?
I have no idea how to answer that.
Who asked that question?
Must have been one of the rabbis who wants to trip me up.
Gilbert, next time. So I've got a question. My ex-wife's cousin's son married a trans guy who then had a baby. He hadn't completed, I guess she was going through transition.
Right.
Hadn't
So it
completed.
So it's a same-sex couple now with a child? Is that the result?
One of the partners was a woman who was changing to become a man, hadn't completed. They then decided they wanted a baby, so the one partner was still female.
Right.
They had the baby,
Yeah.
and then completed the.
Right.
How often does that happen?
I'm not aware of detailed stats, but the reality.
Talk about confused Joel here.
I mean, a formal survey by the, oh God, what's the name of it? The Williams Institute in UCLA. This was maybe 10 years ago. There were 3.5% of the population is LGBT. And what we're seeing now, though, is because people learn about it and understand it more people are coming out. So I would be interested to see them redo that study, and maybe it is close to 10%, which was the Kinsey percentage, that it was about 10% of the population fell within that category. But transgender, my understanding is it's less than 1% of the population. So we're making a big deal. I mean, that's what, and I said it before, I'm angry at certain politicians in other states that are taking advantage of a very small community and victimizing good kids for their own gain. It's terrible.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, what does PFLAG stand for?
Oh, it's now just, it used to be parents,
KFC.
families, and friends of lesbians and gays. It used to be. But then, like about 7 or 8 years ago, the national office said because LGBT isn't part of it, they decided to just say PFLAG is a word. So it used to be parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. Now it's just a word, PFLAG. Kind of like Twitter. What is Twitter? I don't know.
Well, it's like KFC. We don't
Or
call it
KFC.
Kentucky Fried Chicken anymore. It's just KFC. Steve, thank you very much for enlightening us today. And keep up the good work.
I try.
That's your flash drive. I'll get that for you in a moment. Okay, well, that's the end of this morning's program. I just remind you, we have lunch. We can sit at the tables in the back. If you brought yours, I brought mine. Or there'll be lunch, bagels and cream cheese and stuff outside. Our next Hazak Monday program will be in 2 weeks, December 5th. And for that, what happened to the wall of separation between church and state? And the second topic is Jewish LA Perspective After COVID with Steve Windmuller. I'll just remind you that after that, December 11th, we're going to have the Walk with the Rabbi in Balboa Park. And then the volunteer survey, please leave them, bring them up to me or put them out at the registration desk if you've filled them out. The Hanukkah Day, December 19th, we have our morning program, an arts and creativity workshop in the morning, and then our Hanukkah lunch. You're going to be getting information about registering online for that, and please RSVP so that we know how many lunches to order on the event. And with that, have a good day. We'll see you at lunch and the Torah study at 1 with Rabbi Feinstein up in the balcony seminar room. Have a good day. Recording. How you end the recording here. Oh, really?